A killer, a surgeon, and a judge. What do they all have in common? They all play God, whilst one saves lives, and the others potentially take them. They all alter a person's destiny in one way or another. If someone murdered someone close to you and only got a short sentence or got away with it altogether, what would you do? Surely you'd want to take justice into your own hands. But whether or not you were to act on these thoughts is a different question. But sometimes people do. Marianne Bachmeier's life was marked by struggles and challenges, but she found herself at the center of a gripping and tragic story. In the 1970s, Marianne, a single mother, worked tirelessly to make ends meet by running a pub. During this time, she was raising her third child, Anna. The weight of the world rested on Marianne's shoulders as she navigated the trials and tribulations of motherhood. Born on June 3, 1950, Marianne's upbringing was far from easy. She was raised by an alcoholic father and, as a result, often found herself placed in a children's home. Despite these early hardships, Marianne exhibited resilience and determination that would shape her. Before reaching adolescence, Marianne gave birth twice and placed them in adoption. Marianne's third child, Anna Bachmeyer, arrived in 1973. Her life took a devastating turn when tragedy struck her family. Her beloved daughter, Anna Bachmeyer, a bright and cheerful child, went missing on May 5, 1980, following a heated argument. Anna had decided to skip class that day and was en route to visit a friend when she fell victim to the clutches of Klaus Grabowski, their 35-year-old neighbor. Klaus Grabowski, a local butcher with a dark past marred by
YouTube guideline violation,
carried out a heinous act against young Anna. Investigations later revealed the horrifying details of Anna's final hours. Klaus had forcefully confined her in his home, subjecting her to hours of terror and anguish before strangling her with her own tights. He callously disposed of her lifeless body by placing it in a box and discarding it on the bank of a nearby canal, leaving a community in shock and mourning. And the relentless efforts of law enforcement led to Klaus's swift apprehension. When confronted, he admitted to the murder, but vehemently denied any allegations of
YouTube guideline violation.
According to Klaus, Anna had fabricated the accusations in an attempt to extort money from him by threatening to expose his inappropriate actions to her mother. Marianne found the trial of her daughter's murderer difficult. Klaus's defense attorney claimed that Klaus acted because of a hormonal imbalance caused by hormone therapy, which he received years after his voluntary castration. At the time of the case, sex offenders in West Germany were neutered to prevent recidivism. But this was not the case with Klaus Grabowski. However, amidst the pain and grief, Marianne found herself consumed by a mother's undying love and a thirst for justice. Fueled by an unwavering determination, she hatched a plan that would forever alter the course of the trial. During Klaus's trial, with emotions running high, Marianne, in an act of desperation and anguish, took matters into her own hands. In the midst of the courtroom proceedings, Marianne Bachmeier committed an act that shocked the world. She shot Klaus Grabowski, her daughter's killer, in the middle of his trial. She was recorded saying, "He killed my daughter. I wanted to shoot him in the face, but I shot him in the back. I hope he's dead." The courtroom was thrown into chaos, and Marianne's actions became the subject of both intense scrutiny and deep empathy. Marianne Bachmeier exacted her vengeance, but she was soon put on trial for murder. She was asked for a handwriting sample during her trial, and she wrote, "I did it for you, Anna."
It's alive! In the name of God!
Playing God is a theme seen throughout history, whilst the most famous example of this is fiction. It speaks wonders to the idea that people fear it happening.
When this dead hand moves, the monster created by a man they called Mad is turned loose to strike terror into the hearts of men.
Frankenstein serves as a striking representation of the concept. Based on Mary Shelley's classic novel, the story delves into the consequences of scientific ambition and the ethical boundaries that are crossed when humans attempt to assume the role of a creator. The titular character, Dr. Victor Frankenstein, becomes obsessed with the idea of creating life from inanimate matter. Driven by his ambition and a desire to conquer death, he embarks on a perilous journey to bring a creature to life through his scientific experiments. By assembling body parts and using his ingenuity, Frankenstein successfully brings his creation to life, but he quickly realizes the magnitude of his actions. The creature, often referred to as Frankenstein's monster, embodies the repercussions of playing God. Initially innocent and childlike, the creature is abandoned and rejected by its creator, leading to a deep sense of isolation and anger. As the narrative unfolds, the creature seeks understanding and companionship, but its monstrous appearance and the fear it evokes from society prevent any form of acceptance.
To shock women into uncontrolled hysteria.
Elizabeth!
The character of Dr. Frankenstein, in his pursuit of knowledge and power over life and death, disrupts the natural order and takes on a role traditionally reserved for a higher being. This act of creating life from non-living materials challenges the balance of nature and questions the limitations of human understanding. By pushing the boundaries of science and disregarding the moral and ethical implications, Frankenstein assumes the position of a godlike figure who can manipulate life itself. The movie explores the consequences of such arrogance and hubris. Dr. Frankenstein's actions not only result in the suffering and isolation of the creature, but also bring about tragedy and destruction in his own life. The film serves as a cautionary tale, emphasizing the dangers of tampering with the fundamental forces of existence and the importance of acknowledging human limitations.
Welcome back to reality.
Jiankui, a Chinese scientist, made international headlines in 2018 when he announced that he had successfully edited the genes of human embryos, resulting in the birth of twin girls. This controversial experiment involved using a gene editing technique called CRISPR-Cas9 to modify the embryo's DNA, specifically targeting a gene associated with HIV resistance. His actions have naturally raised significant ethical concerns. By engaging in gene editing on human embryos, Jiankui ventured into the realm of manipulating the fundamental building blocks of life. This act can be seen as an attempt to assume the role of a creator, altering the genetic makeup of future individuals before they're even born. It raises profound questions about the limits of scientific intervention in shaping the course of human evolution. The concept of playing God revolves around the idea that humans are taking on powers and responsibilities traditionally reserved for a higher being. In the case of Jiankui, he assumed the role of a genetic engineer, making deliberate modifications to the genetic code of human embryos. By doing so, he disrupted the natural processes of reproduction and inherited traits, ultimately determining the genetic fate of the resulting individuals. The ethical implications of Jiankui's actions are vast. The experiment lacked proper scientific oversight, disregarded established ethical guidelines, and raised concerns about the potential unintended consequences of gene editing. There are concerns about the long-term effects on the health and well-being of the edited individuals and future generations. Furthermore, the experiment opened up the door to the possibility of using the gene editing for non-medical purposes, such as enhancing desired traits or creating designer babies, leading to a slippery slope of genetic manipulation. Jiankui's actions serve as a poignant reminder of the need for careful consideration, regulation, and ethical discourse surrounding the advancements in genetic technology, where the quest for scientific progress intersects with the limits of our understanding and responsibility in shaping life itself. Leon Gary Plosh, born on November 10, 1945 in Baton Rouge, experienced a life-altering event that steered him away from what seemed to be an ordinary path. On February 19, 1984, a series of events unfolded, forever changing Plosh's life. It all began when Jeff Ducey, the karate instructor of Plosh's 11-year-old son Jody, picked him up for a ride. Ducey, a 25-year-old man with a prominent beard, had assured Jody's mother, June, that they would return within 15 minutes. There was no reason for June Plosh to be suspicious of Ducey. He had been teaching karate to 3 of their 4 children and had gained the trust and admiration of the neighborhood. Ducey cherished the time he spent with the boys, and they held him in high regard. Gary Plosh, in an interview with his high school newspaper a year prior, expressed his fondness for Ducey, saying, "He's all of our best friends." June revealed that her son had even given up football and basketball to dedicate more time to Ducey's dojo. Little did June Plosh know that Ducey had ulterior motives and had no intention of taking Jody for a simple neighborhood ride. By evening, the two had boarded a bus bound for the West Coast. Ducey altered his appearance by shaving his beard and dyeing Jody's blonde hair black during the journey. His plan was to pass Jody off as his own son while evading the authorities, who were on their way to apprehend them. Ducey and Jody found temporary lodging in a budget motel near Disneyland in Anaheim, California. Inside the motel room, Ducey subjected his karate student to sexual assault. This continued until Jody mustered the courage to request permission to call his parents, which Ducey surprisingly granted. Jody's parents immediately contacted the police, who traced the call and swiftly apprehended Ducey. Meanwhile, Jody was safely flown back to Louisiana. Mike Barnett, a major in the Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office who had assisted in Ducey's arrest and was acquainted with Gary Plosh, took it upon himself to personally inform him about the unspeakable actions committed by the karate instructor against his son. Barnett stated that Gary reacted just as any parent would upon discovering that their child had been a victim of
YouTube guideline violation.
Plosh, despite the relief of his son being found, remained in a state of tension. In the following days, he secluded himself inside a local bar called the Cotton Club, engaging in conversations with patrons about when they believed Ducey would be returned to Baton Rouge to face trial. One evening, while Plosh was out for a drink, a former colleague from WBRZ News informed them that the disgraced karate instructor would be arriving at 9:08. With a baseball cap and sunglasses concealing his face, Plosh hurriedly made his way to the arrivals hall. Aware of the WBRZ news crew preparing their cameras to capture the moment when Ducey would be escorted from the plane, Plosh discreetly approached a payphone. In that fleeting moment, he made a quick call before reaching into his boot to retrieve a concealed firearm. As the procession of law enforcement officers passed by, Plosh took aim and fired a single shot, striking Ducey in the head. The dramatic footage of Plosh's bullet piercing Ducey's skull was caught on camera by the WBRZ crew. The video, which has since garnered over 20 million views on YouTube, showcases the harrowing moment when Ducey collapses and Plauché is restrained by Barnett against the wall. In the midst of the commotion, Barnett confronted his friend, questioning why he had taken such drastic action. Through tear-filled eyes, Plauché responded, "If somebody did it to your kid, you'd do it too." His words resonated with the raw emotion and desperation of a father seeking to protect his child at any cost. While awaiting trial in jail, Plosh confided in his attorney, Foxy Sanders, expressing his motive for the fateful act. He proclaimed, "I don't want him to do it to other kids." Sanders, in defense of his client, claimed that Plosh had been compelled by the voice of Christ to pull the trigger. Despite the moral complexity of the situation, Plauché's actions were considered murder in the eyes of the law, even though his victim was a notorious child molester. Once the details of how meticulously Doucet had groomed Jody Plosh came to light, Sanders vehemently argued that his client should not spend a single day behind bars. He maintained that Jody's abduction had pushed Gary Plosh into a state of psychological distress, blurring the boundaries of right and wrong. The residents of Baton Rouge held a different perspective. In their eyes, Plosh had acted within his right mind when he took Doucet's life, thus aligning with the sentiment of the local community. Journalist Art Harris, writing for the Washington Post that same year, observed that Baton Rouge residents had already acquitted him in their minds, extending their support from strangers on the street to the familiar faces at the Cotton Club, where Gary Plosh had once frequented enjoying his Miller Lights.
You lie silent there before me. Your tears, they mean nothing to.
Whilst most of the time, someone having their life taken away is not a consensual experience, would your opinion change if it was? Dr. Jack Kevorkian, often referred to as Dr. Death, is a prominent figure in the realm of assisted suicide and euthanasia. He gained significant attention in the 1990s for his involvement in assisting terminally ill patients in ending their lives. Dr. Kevorkian's actions and beliefs sparked a widespread ethical and legal debate, as well as questions about the limits of medical intervention and the concept of playing God. Dr. Kevorkian, a pathologist by profession, believed in the principle of patient autonomy and the right to die with dignity. He developed a device known as the Mercitron, which allowed individuals to self-administer a lethal dose of medication. He assisted numerous patients in their quest for a peaceful death, often using controversial methods that raised ethical concerns within the medical community.
I want this to be a medical service that's controlled. It isn't now. It's all hit or miss. Lay people are shooting each other and suffocating each other and poisoning each other and drowning each other. That's silly. How can doctors stand by and watch that?
Here's how it works. The doctor injects a needle into the patient and starts the flow of the first bottle with a simple saline solution in it.
Then the patient reaches over and just touches that switch once, maybe twice. I'll have him do it twice to make sure. And that cuts off, the mechanism in the machine cuts off this saline inside and turns this one on, which is pentothal.
That'll put a patient into a coma, which then automatically starts the third solution,
which is concentrated potassium chloride, and this stops the heart as soon as it reaches it. So he has a heart attack in deep coma, which is like dying in your sleep.
David Rivlin, the paralyzed Farmington Hills man, one of 3 Oakland County people to win the right to be taken off life support and die, had favored Dr. Kevorkian's method.
And this is an immoral law to stop this, you see. So I will disobey it. Then if I'm a criminal then, you can look at me and say, you're a criminal, then throw me in jail. But keep me there, because if I get out, I'll do it again.
Critics argue that Dr. Kevorkian's actions went beyond the boundaries of medical practice as he actively participated in ending human lives. They view his role as a form of playing God, since he assumed the power to determine who should live or die. Opponents assert that only a higher power or the natural course of life should dictate matters of life and death, not individual choices or the intervention of medical professionals. Regardless of one's perspective on Dr. Kevorkian's actions, his case embodies the complex ethical and moral dilemmas associated with playing God. The notion of deciding when and how a person's life should end raises profound questions about the limits of human agency, the role of medical professionals, and the ethical considerations surrounding the sanctity of life. Dr. Kevorkian's actions challenged societal norms and forced a critical examination of end-of-life choices, autonomy, and the role of medical ethics in decision-making processes. But what if these decisions were made by a group rather than an individual? Would that be democracy? Or is it still too close to the darker side of a grayscale? The term high caste man refers to an individual who belongs to one of the upper castes within the caste system of India. In the traditional Indian social hierarchy, castes were ranked, and certain castes were considered higher or superior in social status compared to others. The higher castes were typically associated with greater privileges, power, and prestige in society. Brahmins, priests, and scholars, and kshatriyas, warriors and rulers, are considered high castes, while Vaishyas, merchants and farmers, and Shudras, laborers and servants, occupy lower positions. The term high caste man specifically refers to a male individual belonging to one of these upper castes. Akku Yadav was a high caste man and grew up in the Maharashtra slum of Kasturba Nagar. He became the leader of a notorious gang that terrorized the slum, engaging in robbery, torture, and murder. Yadav's victims primarily targeted members of the untouchable caste, the lowest social class in India. Exploiting their vulnerability, Yadav committed heinous crimes against over 200 women in the Kasturba Nagar slum. Yadav's criminal activities persisted for almost a decade due to his ability to bribe corrupt officials and intimidate his victims. He knew that the victims belonging to the marginalized caste would be met with ridicule and indifference if they sought help from the police or legal authorities. Even during his trial, Yadav displayed his invincibility by taunting and threatening a woman in court, with a police officer present who laughed at his remarks. These incidents exemplified the deep-rooted corruption within the system. In one such incident, when a victim went to the police station to file a report, instead of assisting her in arresting the man, they raped the woman as well. As a result, more than 20 families were forced to leave Kasturba Nagar. However, Usha Narayani, one of Yadav's victims, refused to be silenced. With the help of her brother-in-law, she approached the deputy commissioner seeking safety and assistance in apprehending Yadav. But the police immediately informed Yadav about the complaint, and his associates threatened them. In an act of defiance, Usha barricaded herself in her house, prepared to defend herself with a gas cylinder and a match. Yadav shouted at her,
"I will throw acid on your face, and you will not be able to file any more complaints. You have no idea what we'll do to you if we ever meet. Getting raped is meaningless. You have no idea what we'll do to you."
The goons eventually retreated when they realized she was willing to sacrifice herself. Upon learning about Usha's stand against Yadav, the enraged community set fire to his house. Yadav, realizing the tide had turned against him, attempted to surrender. Although the police arrested him, the victims feared he would be released on bail due to his connections. In the courtroom, Yadav's audacious behavior pushed one of the victims beyond her breaking point. Unable to bear his insults any longer, she attacked him with her footwear. She told Yadav that either she would kill him or he would have to kill her, saying, "We can't both live on this earth together." Another woman joined her, throwing chili powder, stones, and stabbing Yadav with vegetable knives. His guards fled in terror, leaving Yadav at the mercy of the vengeful women. In the 10-minute attack, he was stabbed 70 times and had his genitals chopped off. Police attempted to arrest 5 of the women responsible for the murder, but the rest of the women protested, and soon every woman in the slum had accepted responsibility for the murder. Retired High Court Judge Bao Vahan publicly supported the women's actions, acknowledging the failure of the legal system and law enforcement to protect them. Eventually, due to lack of evidence, all remaining accused in the Akku Yadav murder case were released. The incident shed light on the flaws within the police system and the injustices faced by marginalized communities. It served as a wake-up call for society and revealed the power of collective action. The women involved in Yadav's murder hoped for societal recognition and change, as they had taken matters into their own hands when the authorities failed to provide justice. If you've made it this far, please consider subscribing and engaging with this video. At the level I'm at, absolutely all engagement makes a massive difference to what I'm doing. Thank you. And until next time, keep fearing the living.